What's IBGC?
It stands for the Institute for Business in the Global Context.
Okay.
And the mission is to look at all issues that are at the intersection of where the world of business meets the world. And we have tried to insert business, entrepreneurs, innovators, the tech geeks, the kid in the garage, the kid in the square, basically anybody who has access to that instrument, whether it's a feature or a smartphone, and other means that may be low-tech to participate in not just insurgency, but also building something. So you could, insurgency, one part of it is breaking something, the other part of it is putting the pieces back together. So, and we're really interested in trying to understand how to integrate those people with the people who sit at the high table of international affairs, you know, the diplomats, the generals, the heads of the UN agencies and the peacekeepers. Actually a couple of years back, we organized a conversation that was on trying to finally find a solution to the Israel-Palestine conflict. And we started with a radical suggestion that the next time, if there is ever a peace talks, the next time such a peace talk is organized, they should have the CEOs of some large corporations like Google and Cisco at the table, along with the relevant parties on both sides, and maybe a lot of scruffy-looking people who are starting up ventures in Ramallah or Gaza, or even in the so-called startup nation of Israel, where there are lots of startups across the country, and maybe have them at the table as well. And initially there was a bit of a pushback from several of our colleagues who kind of thought that was a ridiculous idea. And after about 45 minutes of conversation, it turned out that people thought that, this is an idea worth thinking about. Because we do believe that the state has, in many ways, not quite worked in, not only in the Middle East, it seems to be failing in other parts of the world as well. And that's a longer conversation. And social media sort of had a short life in maybe trying to find a solution that states couldn't find. And maybe we should now try the third S, which is the startup, as a route to not just peace building, not just stability, but prosperity and thriving and growing. So there are many different visions of this, and I'm sure we'll hear from Fadi about his vision being actively at the heart of these issues. So we look forward to hearing your perspective and having a conversation about that. There are lots of absolutely inspiring companies, both small and large startups that several of us have had the pleasure of working with and seeing across the Middle East, which are frankly exciting and inspiring. And most people sitting here in Boston, Boston's supposed to be one of the great innovative centers of the world, most people in Boston aren't even aware that such an ecosystem exists in that part of the world. So hopefully, we'll build some awareness and some insurgency right here in Boston on that account. So with that,
thank you.
Nadim.
And now, part of what the Fire Center is doing is also a initiative by Professor Warde. Professor Ibrahim Warde will talk a bit about our business history program and business, the sort of Fletcher school approach to business cases, also as an introduction before.
Okay, so thank you, Nadim, and thank you all for coming, and especially thank you, Fadi, who's a bit of a mentor, although we didn't ask him for permission to consider him as a mentor for this program, but we assume that he is, because there aren't many people like him who have both the entrepreneurial background and the willingness, actually, to take time away from his business endeavors to come to places like Fletcher. So I want to start with a reference to two courses offered at Fletcher which actually gave me the idea for a business history project. First of all, some of you may be MIB students. So for those who do not know that, like in addition to the MALT degree, which is in terms of numbers and history, the oldest degree here at the Fletcher School, there's a Master of International Business, which is a bit like an MBA, but with a Fletcher component, meaning that there's a focus on politics, a focus on knowing the regional aspect of what's going on. Because incidentally, if you look at the world of social sciences, a few years ago, there was a movement inside the academic world basically saying that regional studies were not needed, basically. That there was like one size fits all approach, and where you didn't need to know things like foreign languages, etc. And unfortunately, this has been the dominant view in much of the academic world. And Fletcher is a bit of the exception, because one of the courses that I teach here is on business in the Islamic world. And the full title of the course is The Islamic World, Political Economy and Business Context. So I've been teaching this course for about 10 or 11 years. And initially, I was looking for case studies to be used in the course. And I had a hard time finding good ones or relevant ones, because most of them tend to be very ethnocentric, in that there was the view that the Middle East is important, but it's mostly about being on the receiving end of the accepted wisdom in business schools. And as a result, the way in which the course was conceived was one that would try to take seriously the institutions in the Middle East and the culture, etc., and try to look at the world of business in that context. And that was, again, part of the beginning of the insurgency against the exclusive focus on security issues. Because unfortunately, there's a tendency to limit the Middle East to the security challenges and to the failed states, etc. Whereas I do spend a lot of time outside of Fletcher traveling to that part of the world. And the one thing I always found fascinating was that life went on despite the wars and despite all the problems. And there were lots of interesting entrepreneurial ventures in that part of the world. Now, there's another course that I teach at the Fletcher School, which is a course on informal and underground finance. And it's a very exciting course to teach, because we try to look at everything that happens outside of the regular financial system. And there's plenty that goes on that tends to go unnoticed in general. And it is quite well attended. And it's, again, a reflection on the Fletcher perspective on international relations and business. So based on my experience, I've been discussing with Nadim the possibility of starting a business history program at the Faris Center, where we would encourage the study, again, as the name indicates, of business history, but it's kind of a hybrid of both business school type understanding of what's going on and the Fletcher School perspective on it, which is, again, taking seriously the political context as well as the cultural context, etc. So what we hope to do is, first of all, give grants and fellowships to students to study certain topics dealing with business history in the region, and hopefully over time start other initiatives like maybe a journal, conferences, etc. So we've just set the stage for a series of initiatives over the next few years, starting actually in the fall. And so this is, in a nutshell, what we hope to do. And hopefully we'll be creating a network of like-minded people, even outside of Fletcher and outside of the US. Already there was an event earlier today with mostly Harvard Business School and Kennedy School students. And internationally, I've been noticing over the years a number of students who are a bit like orphans or stepchildren in the academic world, in that they were interested in the same subject, but there was no institutional structure to sustain them. So, for example, there are a couple of French people who are working on dissertations dealing with business history, and they all feel lost in terms of, okay, we're writing papers, where do we publish them? We've been doing monographs on certain established businesses, and what do we do with them, etc. So our ambition at the Ferris Center and at the Fletcher School is to develop a structure that can sustain all those initiatives.
Thank you, Brian. Okay, so now it gives me great pleasure to welcome Fadi Ghandour to give us his perspective. Fadi needs very little introduction, and we've circulated your
So they know everything about me now.
They know more or less everything about you. There's one more thing we would like them to know, which is that we've been talking about your coming here since the day I arrived. So this is for us a very special occasion, and we've decided to use your visit to launch the business history program, and so you're very welcome.
I'm honored.
Thank you.
Thank you. So allow me to stand up here and just move a little bit, as I always do. Thank you so much, Nadim, Dean, Dr. Warde, ladies and gentlemen. I'm honored that you are taking the time at night to listen to the non-ISIS story of the region. So I want to excite you about the region, which is very difficult to have even our own people excited about. But maybe you'll tell me at the end of the evening whether I have enticed you to actually look at it a little bit differently than the way I look at it, at least, so that maybe we'll be fair to a region and a place that is so critical to, I think, the history and the civilization of the world. And we've lagged a bit behind, but we are trying to move along, and there's plenty of stuff happening there. So I'm going to tell you several stories. Let me give you a little bit of my background, just so that so that when I open up for questions, and I'd like this to be as interactive as possible. And you need to tell me, Nadim, how long do we have, so that, because I tend, as you might have seen, talk too much. So stop me and tell me, stop, let's talk and let's ask, because I think the interaction and the questions are much more interesting than what I'm going to tell you. But let me tell you 2 or 3 things that I've been doing in the region that is a reflection of what is happening in the region today. My claim to fame, my raison d'etre as a person standing here is building a logistics business that became known as the FedEx of the Middle East. So that business eventually was the first company to have gone public on the Nasdaq stock exchange from the region, and has gone global since then. So it's a company that is very well known in the region, and many people find it, and I find it as an inspiring story, and I was happy to have been part of it, built by people that are believers and from the region and are as good as anyone on a global basis. So the talent pool there is incredible, equal to anyone that is in this industry. So that's one. The other thing that I have been doing in my life, along with Aramex, and Aramex was built as a company that is completely integrated in its thinking in the society that it lives in. So we are an extremely activist organization. When I say activist, I mean literally activist. So we don't have corporate social responsibility. We have activist positioning in everything that we do when we decide to do something about the society that we live in. For instance, and very quickly, this is not part of our subject, but for instance, we reinvented basketball in Jordan. Completely. All right? We did it. So as a company, we are in the package delivery business, but when we decided that we want to work with youth, we said we want to work with youth in sports, and then when we did that, we actually rejuvenated the whole industry. It's not professional, so this is all amateur basketball from Little League all the way to national championships, men and women. We reintroduced, for instance, women basketball in Jordan, which continues to happen today. So very hands-on. And from that, we created an organization called Ruwad. Ruwad in English means entrepreneurs. And the idea was that entrepreneurs like me are not part and parcel of the development in our society, because businesses normally think only of profits and profitability. We don't think of the society around us. You know, this is the global story of the 1% versus the business community. Are you, or the rich getting richer? Are you only focusing, is the business of business only business, or does the business have a role in society? So we are exactly the anti-business of business is only business, and we think that we have a wrong society, and we created an organization that eventually went out and spun out and became independent, that works with youth, and the origin of it is entrepreneurs for development. So the private sector needs to be active in society, and we need to work with youth, and we do all sorts of things with youth, empowerment, volunteerism, and activism on the ground across the region. So, and there's plenty of those. Social entrepreneurship is happening across the board along with our youth. And the third thing that I'm doing, which is what I'm going to talk to you about today, is I'm a venture capital. I've been an angel investor for the past decade. I'm the most prolific angel investor in the region, and have invested probably in the most important internet companies that have popped up our region. And now I'm going to tell you about the potential in the region and what is happening in the region other than terror, destruction, and everything else in between. So, President Obama, as you know, is in Saudi Arabia talking to the Gulf leaders over there. And most of the talk, I was listening to the news yesterday, and they were talking, you know, they were going to discuss ISIS and whatever. But the question of entrepreneurship and youth empowerment is not on their agenda, I assure you. But the question of the price of oil and employment in the Gulf is a critical question. We're not dreaming of ISIS every single day of our lives. We're not worried about ISIS the way you think the world should be worried about ISIS, even though, yes, we worried about them. But we are not encountering them every day while we're walking on the street. We have worries exactly like the worries that you have. Employment, youth, education, empowerment when the price of oil goes down. The thinking in the Gulf is, how are we going to create our economies in a post-oil world? That is the biggest subject that is happening in the region. And that's why entrepreneurship is so essential, and something that we need to discuss deeply and see what is really happening in that place. So, there was also an op-ed yesterday, or an editorial by David Ignatius in the Washington Post. If you didn't read it, you should read it. Yesterday it came out. It says, the headline says, "Don't give up on young Arabs." So I know David, so David is a knowledgeable person. He knows the region very well. And somebody shared with him a youth survey that pops out every single year in the Arab world. It's called the Arab Youth Survey. They survey Arabs for the past 6 or 7 years by a respectable organization, and it basically says, here are the 10 things. If you can Google it and find the Arab Youth Survey, you will find the 10 things that young Arabs are thinking about the region. The first thing it says, they actually reject ISIS, but that's not the subject of the op-ed of our friend David Ignatius. He basically says, and quotes in the survey, a couple of things. Arabs are basically saying our best days are ahead of us. So there is a sense of optimism among the youth. So the best days are coming. But at the end of it, after saying all the good things that the Arab Youth Survey says, and it says, you know, we want to find jobs. These are the things that are concerning to us. We want to fight corruption. We are worried about the economy. And yes, we're worried about ISIS, but we refuse the ideology of ISIS. So all good stories, but here's how he ends it. He says, a simple summary, the last sentence of his op-ed, it says, a simple summary, don't give up on young Arabs. They're living through hell. Okay, but they want the same modern, secure world that most people do. But he says we're living through hell. I mean, who told him we are living through hell? Where did he get the idea that we, 350 million people in the region, are actually living through hell? So that is what you guys see probably every day about us. You think we are living through hell and we are struggling and we are barely able to live, but that's not the reality. Let me tell you another story about the region. The region is defined here, again, not only through ISIS, but through the failed states, as we were talking earlier. Today, it's defined by a civil war in Syria. Yes, it's a terrible thing. I'm not going to discount it. There's a civil war in Syria and the Syrian failed state. There's a situation and a civil war probably in Iraq and a lot of destruction. There's one in Libya and there's one in Yemen. But my argument is these states have always had their issues over the past 40 or 50 years. There's nothing, I mean, the amount of destruction has obviously been accelerated, but they've been outside of the norm. They're not the norm in the region. It's the other 18 states. There are 22 Arab states. There are 18 of them that do not face what you think the Arab world looks like. So we're not Rifqa. We are about Dubai. Nobody talks about the Dubai model, but every day we're hearing about Rifqa. But I'll tell you, I mean, who is from the Arab world here? When was the first time that you heard about Rifqa? And probably maybe now, or maybe when you read it and watched it on CNN, or read it in a newspaper in the West. We're not defined by Raqqa. We don't know what Raqqa is about, and we don't know. We don't feel that we are identifying with it. But I can tell you, a lot of Arabs, and in the Arab Youth Survey, they tell you we identify with Dubai. We want to go to Dubai. We identify maybe with Beirut and its diversity, or maybe with Amman and its resilience, and maybe with Cairo with its chaotic charm, and maybe there is stuff happening in the region that is not about destruction. It's about the aspirations of youth. And then there is also that story of Iran where everybody is worried about it, but there's also that story of hope and rejuvenation in a country that has 80 million people that has been closed and suddenly opening up, and we're going to see talent, we're going to see people that are already connected to the internet, that are already innovating. So there's that incredible potential that might pop up in the region. So that's what I'm going to tell you about. 350 million people, 65% of the population of the region, ladies and gentlemen, is under the age of 25. We are a young population. Everything about us is about youth. And some of us call it the youth bunch. We're worried about our youth bunch, but it is a youth dividend. So if we think about it from the positive perspective, how can a nation take advantage of its youth, because it is the future of the region, then we will find and we will think about solutions, and we will think about innovation, and we will think about change in a positive manner, rather than saying, are our youth really going all to be pulled into that radical ideology? No, it's not. Yes, there are some, but that's not the story of the region. So high unemployment, like everywhere else in the world. So it's not only a regional story. There's about 28% of our youth that are unemployed. Something that is concerning, and Spain has exactly a similar unemployment problem. So nothing that is extremely different than the rest of the world. So I'm just trying to tell you that we have our own issues, just like any country has its own issues. We have to deal with those issues. But the region also is about, if you want to look at it as a combined region of 350 million people, it's about $2 trillion, bigger than the Indian economy, bigger than the Russian economy, the old BRICS of the world. The region is bigger than them. We have our challenges in melting the geography and looking at that market as one big market, and that's something that the entrepreneurs are trying to do. But think of it that way. There is a potential of $2 trillion, 350 million people, 65% of them under the age of 25. So for any company that's thinking to build a business, they think, oh, wow, this is a market that's extremely exciting. And that's how you need to think about the region. Another thing you need to think about the region is that it is effectively connected online. So everybody has a mobile phone. There's various countries revolve from either 100% with a regular mobile phone to 200% which means 2 phones per individual, and 45% practically, roughly, of smartphones, and growing at an exponential manner. So by the year 2020, this is my own statistic, so you can quote me on it, but I have no studies to back it. But I'm going to bet anyone on it that by the year 2020, every single person living in the region is going to be connected through broadband, through his mobile smartphone. The statistics tell us we're moving in that direction. So the potential of the market is already there. Is exactly, and that is, and the region's average capita per income, if you want to take it holistically as a region, is around $10,000 or $12,000. So already bigger per capita than the Indian market, and markets that everybody is very hot about. Who think this is the place to be. And actually, the internet penetration in the region is higher than the global average of the internet. The global average is about 37%. We're already over that by far. So countries like Saudi Arabia is at 73% already today. So people are connected and people are interacting online. Let me give you a few statistics about social media. Why? I mean, social media is important for many reasons, because a lot of transactions in the future are going to happen on Facebook. And so it's essential to know who is the population of Facebook and what are the Arabs saying on Facebook and on Twitter, because they're an indication of the societal challenges that they are looking at today and they are facing. So there's 140 million Arabs online today on Facebook. 120 of them are active. And the definition of active for Facebook is somebody that posts something, I think, once a week. Right? So that is about 10% of the Facebook population. That is higher than the average population of the Arab world to the global population. The Arabs are about 5% of the global population, but they're 10% of the Facebook population, where a lot of things are happening. So, and they are writing there, they are expressing their opinion, they are buying, they are selling, they are doing all sorts of things over there. In Saudi Arabia, two things that you need to know, a lot of things you need to know about Saudi Arabia, but two things when it comes to social media. They're the biggest tweeters on earth per capita. Wow. Why is it important to say that statistic? Because if you go today and see the subjects trending in Saudi Arabia, you will not see the word ISIS at all. And Saudi Arabians are and find Twitter as the place where they're expressing their opinions. So you will find very serious issues other than football. So Saudi Arabians are crazy about football like the rest of us. Soccer in the US. It's not your football, it's soccer. So you see that subject in season. But then when it's not in season, you are seeing Saudi Arabians, the average Saudi Arabian, going on Twitter and actually talking about society in Saudi Arabia and the issues that they want the government to face. And government allows it to happen completely freely for many reasons. One of them, to know what the people are thinking, and it is a place for us to know. So the Arab street has moved from the street to the cloud. So we know what they're talking about. You will know what they're talking about. When President Obama was not met at the airport yesterday by King Salman, that was a trending topic in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabians paid attention and noticed and started talking about it. It's essential that you know that happens, because we're all the time complaining. Yes, Saudi Arabia and the Arab world has its issues. Yes, women don't drive over there, and all the prejudices that you want, okay, feed on them more. But know also, and we will address that issues, and these issues are being talked about. It's not as if they're not being talked about. By the way, the Shura Council, which is, let's call it, the Shura Council is the consultative council of Saudi Arabia, are discussing women driving today. This past week, it's being a subject on the agenda to discuss. But the essential element to talk about why are we talking about Twitter is to say that there is an alternative place where free discussion is happening. It might not be completely free, but there is a platform that is happening over there, and we need to listen. We need to listen to it, and we need to listen to it carefully and pay attention to it on a global basis. Because the region is so essential, and because we keep paying attention to the region, and because we think the region is a source of trouble in many ways. Its price of oil is a source of trouble. Its ideology sometimes is a source of trouble, and the meddling of the West in the region is also a source of trouble for us. So we need to pay attention to what really happens over there, rather than fall into the trap of superficiality that the media paints us with. Another thing that you need to know is that the highest people that spend time on Facebook in the world are in the region. And the highest country that spends time on Facebook, by the way, is Iraq in the world. Average 45 minutes per day. And I think the Arab world is around 37 minutes. Why is that? Why does that matter? Because there's something happening there. So there is that concept that Arabs don't read, but I'm saying Arabs might not, I don't know where that research came out of, but they're certainly writing, and what they do on Facebook is not only sharing photographs. We just need to look. We're looking, it's like you're looking in one direction and the action is happening somewhere else. The game is there, not there. So we're looking there, but something else is happening over there, and we're not looking. We're not really understanding what these people are saying, why they are saying it, and how they're addressing it. So in the early days of the Arab Spring, everybody blamed Facebook and Twitter for the revolution, and then suddenly, no, it's not. So why is it not? And what happened? Why are we not suddenly allowed to say that it is okay that we are connected online virtually, and there are role models, and things can happen in one place, and in another place you're going to learn it, because it is where geography melts on Facebook, because the long tail of connectivity is so essential, and everybody will start addressing similar issues. So these are essentials. Why am I saying these things? Because they're part. It is when somebody is spending 40 minutes a day. We need to know. We need to know why is somebody spending an hour over there. I was stopped this morning. I gave a talk yesterday, similar to this one, at the Arab Bankers Association of North America in New York yesterday. I was waiting for my Uber this morning to come to the airport, and a gentleman comes to me who is a Syrian American. He says, I listened to you yesterday, and why do you think it's good that Arabs are spending 40 times? I don't think it's a good idea that Arabs are. I think it's negative. They should go be reading a book. Okay, I said, well, but they're spending 40 minutes there. We need to know what they're talking about. Don't punish them for that. And Facebook actually is paying attention because they think there's business to be done. And this will take me back to my story of talking about startups. And because Facebook is the platform where a lot of the activity of commerce and new media is popping up in the region. One more statistic that I want to tell you is that at the current growth of broadband and data consumption in the region, by the year 2021, the mobile data traffic will increase 16-fold. 16-fold in the region. So we are consumers of knowledge. Whatever you want to call it, there is consumption of knowledge, because when you talk about 16-fold of growth in data consumption, people are embracing the 21st century and embracing it very quickly. Let me tell you an anecdote. In Warde, the organization that I'm involved in, we give scholarships for students in return for volunteer work 4 hours a week. So every semester we interview about 150 people to take 50 of them to get the scholarship. I participate in that interview, and we give the scholarships for people that are on the margins. Practically the poorest of the poor, people that cannot really afford, and by the way, the tuition is no more than $3,000 per year. So this is not a massive tuition for $3,000 per year for a local university. In the interview, every student will be asked a question as he sits down. Show me your phone. Everybody has a smartphone. Everybody is on Face. Don't call it Facebook. They are on Face. They are on Whats. So WhatsApp, they call it Whats. It's like, and these are 18-year-olds. And these cannot, a telephone will cost them around $300. It is their graduation present. The family pitches in to buy them the phone because it is their most valuable item. Why is it their most valuable item? Because they're on Face and they can talk. Because it's a conservative society and they're not allowed to physically sometimes wander, but they wander online. So they connect, they talk, they meet men, they meet women. They are able to transcend and get over the traditional things that society sometimes prevents them to do that. They listen to music, which is in many cases, you cannot listen to music or watch TV or do things. And it allows them to do that. You need to pay attention to that. We need to know what is it that they're talking about and why it is so valuable. And that phone is their life, effectively. And as if you hear the refugee stories today out of Syria, if you ask any refugee, how are you connecting back to know what's happening with your family back in Syria, you know what they tell you? Facebook. Mm-hmm. Facebook. That's the only way that they can know and they can post. And how do they connect to Facebook? Through their smartphone. It's not through laptops. The refugees are not running with laptops, but they're running through a smartphone, or they will find somebody that has a smartphone that they can connect to and send a message back. That's the general scene. There are thousands and thousands of startups that are popping out in the region because of this infrastructure boom, if you want to call it, in terms of connectivity, in terms of the Dubai that looks like the ultimate 21st century city, because there is plenty of talent that is coming out of the region. Yes, people will complain about the education system, but like every education system, we paint it in a wide brush, and yes, it needs to be fixed, but there are plenty of young people that are coming out and actually doing it. There's 140,000, as you would know here in Boston, 140,000 Saudi Arabians on government scholarship studying in the West that are going to go back. Talent is there. You need to think of the future and not think of where we are today. What are these 140,000 people going to go back to do? Some people will tell you, God help them, because how are they going to face life over there? Or if you are an optimist and think that the cup is half full, you're going to say, oh wow, there's a fantastic amount of talent that is going to back, and let us wait and see what's going to happen there. So in the startup world, where things are happening in Lebanon, so I call it the axis of innovation rather than the Bush axis of evil. So there's an axis of innovation in the region, and that axis of innovation, believe it or not, happens in 4 countries, and as a first tier, and then there's a second tier of countries that are cities. Let's talk cities. So Beirut is a place where there's a lot of innovation because the government decided through the central bank to avail $400 million of venture capital money deployed through VCs for the knowledge-based and creative industries in Lebanon. $400 million is a lot of money. You can create an industry with that. In Jordan, because 15 years ago, King Abdullah of Jordan, when he became king, he decided that the internet and technology is going to be a strategic positioning of the country. So we have a whole set of generation of techies that are popping up. The techies meaning the software developers of the region are mostly Jordanians. You know WeightWatchers.com? You know everything that you see on Weight Watchers is with 300 engineers in Jordan. They run everything about Weight Watchers, including their technology, including their you like that, including managing the servers, including customer service. Who would have thought, right? But they are able to, and the company is owned by an Indian man, and he moved it from Bombay to Jordan because he married a Jordanian. I guess woman influenced him to come to Amman. Hidden story, he doesn't want to tell. I discovered him by accident. I said, what are you doing here? He says, there are engineers. That's what I'm doing here. And I can get 3 hours extra closer to the west because in Bombay, it is 3 hours more, so they have to stay later at night. I came to Amman, one, for family reasons, and number two, I'm able to get engineers. And I don't want to tell anybody my story. And there are tens and tens of companies that are doing similar things across the region. Egypt is another, Cairo is another part of the axis of innovation, and Dubai. This is where startups are popping out. And then the second tier, and I'll surprise you now, the second tier that is happening very quickly now is Saudi Arabia. Riyadh and Jeddah and Dhahran, the 3 major cities in Saudi Arabia. Because I'm a VC, I get to see what's happening, and suddenly we're seeing an accelerated knocking on the door by Saudi companies. You wouldn't think that happens. But yes, it happens. You know why? Because the Saudis suddenly realized something that they should have realized a long time ago. Everybody wants to go to their market and build businesses over there. And they said, okay, why don't we build our own businesses for our own markets? Natural progression of process, and government is not employing, and they're all online, and it is easy to learn in the internet world because everybody is connected. So you don't have that problem, and role models popping up. So there's a company called Haraj. Is anybody from Saudi Arabia here? Are you? No. Anybody from? Nobody. So, and has anybody from Lebanon heard of a company called Haraj? You have called. You know Haraj. You know what they do. So Haraj is, in my view, the hottest startup in Saudi Arabia today. They're disrupting. They're in the listings business, classifieds, and they sell everything online, everything you can imagine. And they have 400 million page views a month. And it started by a Saudi who really doesn't, just out of his young man, maybe 27, 28 years old, and growing tremendously, generating a lot of revenue for himself. Some people are estimating that the company is already worth $250 million. Who would have thought that could happen out of Saudi Arabia? 3 areas that are happening in the startup world that you need to think about. Fintech. So the Arab world is, one of our problems is that we are the least banked region in the world. Underbanked. 14% of the Arab population is banked. It's a big challenge and a big opportunity for fintech, because you bypass banking and you go into the 21st century and suddenly you can create an online presence. So there are payments, wallets, mobile payments. These companies are popping up in the region. Some solutions are coming out from outside of the region, but it's an opportunity. There's already one of the major banks in the UAE that's talking about creating a virtual bank, completely. No physical presence, but completely virtual presence where you can open up your account and be out there. So lots of innovation is coming out there, in that space. Most of this innovation is happening in Africa, by the way. So as some of you know, M-Pesa out of Kenya. M-Pesa is the ultimate payment system, and 80% they say of payments in Kenya today happen through the mobile phone. And that is reflected in the region. It's starting to happen. Lots of innovation happening in that space across the region. The other area is media, obviously. The traditional media is under strain. TV and print, like everywhere else in the world, are going away. But media today, media still spends money on TV and on print proportionally much more than digital media, even though people spending time. And that's why I had mentioned that people are on Facebook, people are on Twitter. Again, story on Saudi Arabia is that Saudi Arabia is also the highest, has the highest per capita viewership of Twitter, of YouTube in the world. 1 billion views, I don't know, a week. I don't know how that statistic happened. So why is that important? Because there is a commercial activity that's going to happen around it, and there is new media. The hottest new media startups in the Arab world, by the way, are in Saudi Arabia. Have you heard of a company called U-Turn? So U-Turn is a Saudi company, started by someone called Qaswar al-Khatib in Jeddah. It's a It has about 1 billion views a year, probably the highest views, which is what got YouTube, by the way. Every executive in YouTube started paying attention suddenly to Saudi Arabia because of those viewerships. It's a comedy show. They produce their own original content with Saudi cultural flavor, and he's monetizing on it. And he's extremely, I mean, if you look at it, you will understand that there is such incredible diversity in Saudi culture. And there is another company called Tilfaz 11, Tilfaz 11. Tilfaz 11 is another YouTube multi-channel, not only YouTube, but the multi-channel original content in Saudi Arabia that is having hundreds of millions of views. New businesses. All media companies in the region are starting to say, oh, oops, so TV is dying, print is dying, we need to look at these new businesses. So lots of new young startups that are going into the content and creative industries and the culture. It's not only, it's essential that we understand that this is not only about, this is about original storytelling of our region, within our region, for our region in Arabic. People only want to listen in Arabic in Saudi Arabia and in the rest of the region. They don't want to listen in English. They want their own Arabic also, not only a general Arabic. And they want it to be very hyper-local, that is connected to exactly their community. So the story in Jeddah is different than the story in Riyadh. It's different than the story in Amman. And that's why it's virtual, where everyone can see it, but it's also hyper-local at the same time. And we're seeing a lot of these companies that are popping up in the same time. So new media, fintech, and e-commerce. So e-commerce is the biggest thing that is happening in the region, and it's the most obvious and visible thing that's happening. Our first $1 billion company in the region, in the tech space, in the internet space, is Souk.com. It's the first unicorn in the region. They just raised a big series of about $270 million at practically a valuation of $1 billion. A validation that the region can be part of the rest of the world because we have a unicorn. So we are all celebrating. And there are many gazelles now, they call the rest are gazelles. There are many companies that are between $100 and $500 million in the internet space today. Some of them are Lebanese, like Anghami, which is the Spotify of the region. Very successful company out of Beirut. Fantastic talent. And every single, most of the new artists and singers in the Arab world want to be on the Anghami platform today. It's already going in terms of its raise and in terms of valuations in hundreds of millions of dollars. There's a company also called in e-commerce, Careem, is the biggest competitor of Uber. So they launched before Uber in the region. So when Uber started in the US, two McKinsey guys in Dubai left McKinsey and launched an app for Dubai. So when Uber came, there was already a Careem. And Careem grows 25% month over month. 25% month over month. They're already in about 10 cities across the region and adopted very, very quickly. They have about, so talk about job creation, they have about 23,000 drivers in their network today. And in some countries where you are allowed to be a private citizen and actually do the ultimate Uber model, the Uber X, in Jordan, for instance, and in Lebanon, you are finding a lot of kids that are going and renting cars to become Careem drivers or Uber drivers. Wow. And the regulators are fighting them while they're creating jobs. So the regulator always cannot catch up because he says, if you're not a taxi, you can't drive somebody from one place to another. While at the same time, they're saying we have 27% unemployment. So what do you care about this guy if he's able to take somebody from one place to another and earn a living in a new economy that the regulator could not even imagine? Because you had to explain to the regulator how the actual app works. Because they're still in the 20th century. I'm not kidding. I mean, this is a real story. Saying here, you click here, and that's what happens. And then, so there are many companies in that space. Property Finder, which is revolutionizing, again, taking the listings business and the classifieds business in real estate. And it went out of Dubai, and it's already recently raised a round of over about $20-25 million at a valuation of $200 million. So you are getting the stories that you hear here, but we hear them over there. You don't read about them anywhere. I mean, except if you go to wanda.com, which is another organization I'm involved in, and we launched wanda.com because we said if you read the local newspapers or if you read global newspapers, you're never going to read about startups. Never. You're never going to read a good story. So we created wanda.com as a media platform to tell the stories of entrepreneurs. There are 5 new stories every single day on wanda.com telling stories of entrepreneurs. He raised this much, here's a new startup. There are no less today, like I can tell you, no less today than 10,000 startups that have popping up across the region. On average, as a small VC, we're only a $75 million VC, we see 3 startups a day. We see 3 startups a day. That's not, we're 7 people. So we are busy, there's new money that is going into that space. So, and there are about 140 entrepreneurial organizations that suddenly popped up. 5 years ago, there was nobody looking at entrepreneurship. Today, every single city in the Arab world has an incubator and accelerator, at least, either supported by the private sector or by government. At least one. In Dubai, there are 8 of them. In Beirut, there are already 3. The American University of Beirut is launching one. American University of Cairo has one. Flat 6 Labs in Cairo has one, and they have 6 other cities now. One in Tunis, one in Jeddah, one in Riyadh coming up soon, one in Abu Dhabi. And they have an incredible amount of companies that are applying. The MIT business plan competition in the Arab world that happens every year started with a couple of thousand applicants. This year they closed at 6,000 applicants for their startup competition, which just closed in Jeddah, by the way, they're finalists. So big companies in the West like Tiger Global, the VCs are already starting to think of the region. So the potential is slowly happening. New jobs in the 21st century are slowly happening. Private equity funds that only used to invest in big rounds and in traditional business suddenly are saying, oops, we don't want to miss on the 21st century opportunity. So that's the region I am seeing today. When Maktoub, which was the most successful internet company in the Arab world, which looked like Yahoo when Yahoo was successful a very long time ago, got acquired by Yahoo in 2009. They had raised only, by the time they got acquired for about $170 million, they had raised only about $7 million.
Wow.
Today, on average, the round is hovering around, for the early stage, around $5 million in the region. So it's happening. So lots of companies are moving very rapidly, like a hockey stick in my view. And by the year 2017, 2018, you're going to start to hear some really big stories. The first IPO of over $1 billion of a tech company is going to create and unleash an amazing amount of optimism and can do, and people that want to copy what others have done. When Maktoub sold to Yahoo, the explosion, I call the Arab world in the tech space pre-Maktoub and post-Maktoub Yahoo. So post-Maktoub Yahoo, a lot of graduates from that scene created around 10 or 15 companies that are, it's like the PayPal mafia, if you know. PayPal mafia, people graduated from PayPal, effectively created the current Silicon Valley. So the current axis of innovation in the region were mostly people that were touched by Maktoub in its early days. And if you have 3 or 4 of those happening in the coming 2 years, then you're going to have an absolute proliferation of startups. So that's very quickly, I think very quickly, I don't know how much but the region is happening, and it's exciting, and there's plenty to do over there. So, yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
Tell me your name and where you're from, please.
Imad Atallah from Beirut, Lebanon.
Ahlan wa sahlan.
I do want to voice, I have a question.
Creator of the Hapometer.
Okay. Which is what?
Well, let me ask my question first. But prior to asking my question, I just want to suggest, I want to say that I do appreciate the positive outlook that you are portraying about the startup culture, the youth dynamism and its promise.
Right.
And I, from my experience, I fully agree with that. It's a real picture that you're painting, and I appreciate that.
Thank you.
What I feel that where I would appreciate your insights is about.
You can disagree with me also, by the way. Don't.
You haven't said about anything about, well, sort of about this point that, you know.
Which is,
as much as you do, I do not see the problem with the youth culture, with the all the beautiful things that are happening in the different cities, from Saudi Arabia to Lebanon, Beirut to.
You don't see that, or you see that?
No,
You do.
I don't see. I mean, that's great. What's happening? Where I feel the problem is with the government and the structural impediments that stand in the way. You haven't talked about that, and I heard some glimpses of painting a rosy picture there, and I'm iffy about that. So my question is.
That's because I'm an entrepreneur, by the way. And an entrepreneur sees things as opportunities.
Yes, I agree with that, but
I'll answer your question.
But here's my question. I haven't asked it yet. You mentioned RICA. I'm leading to the question. You mentioned RICA. No one has heard of. I haven't heard.
You mean
RICA?
Raqqa.
Right.
Raqqa in Syria, the capital of ISIS.
Hopefully, it will remain a Syrian city. That's a dormant problem. It was an issue from 30 years ago and 50 years ago. It was dormant. And
how do you know?
Because if you compare it to the high unemployment that continues to exist throughout the region, and the youth struggling to have housing, a decent job, not everybody is a brain who's going to create the next Google and Facebook and whatnot. So there are structural impediments in the way, and those who are sort of defending those impediments are the Arab dictators. And the question here is there a sort of an unwitting complicity between business leaders such as
me?
Yes, because you're not in a startup.
Ask me the question.
You're not in a startup.
No, but you have to ask the question.
So, the business community of leaders like yourselves.
Yes.
Right, who are established.
Yes.
Been established for years.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
We are
very happy that we are established also. Ask me the question. What's the question?
Where is the role of the business community?
The business community is the biggest investor in the startups in the Arab world today. The Arab money.
I haven't asked the question. That's not my question.
If you could.
I know what you're getting at.
In pressuring these governments and changing course, the dictatorships continue.
Okay.
And whether they are in Beirut, because there's a plutocracy there, whether it is in Jordan, because there's a dictatorship also, Saudi Arabia, which is a Wahhabi, obscurance. So you name it, including Dubai. And I can give you some example. I have customers in Dubai, and I see it, and it's just.
If they know your opinion, they're not going to be your customers. So. Be very careful about how you talk to your customers.
You're right.
But let me tell you something. You can take all the problems that you are talking about and say, because we have all these problems, we are going to come to America and live here. Because America is the land of the free. But hold on. You asked your question. I'm gonna answer you. And you are going to say, we have too many problems in the region, and we have too many dictators, and things are not happening, and the Arab business community is in complicity with the dictators, and they don't want the youth to happen, because we want to bring the Arab world down on ourselves and destroy it, including ourselves, because we have a Masada complex. Because that's your question. The reality, yes, that's your question. The reality of the matter, sir, is that we are employing people, and we are creating hope in the region, despite all the restrictions that are happening on the ground. Yes, there are restrictions. Yes, there are cultural and economic challenges, but we are on the ground, and we are working, and the business community is working. Yes, there are challenges of governments opening up borders so that we can allow the trade to happen freely. Yes, we need to have an ease of moving of capital, products, and people across these countries. Yes, there are these challenges. not minimizing them. You can read them in any newspaper. I am telling you that there are people who are defying them and actually building businesses. And these people that are building businesses are from the average citizen.
I am one, sir.
And you are one, and they are from the average citizen, and they are doing things. And investments are happening. You can say, it's too complicated, and what do you want me to do? To be a revolutionary and bring all the regimes down? I'm saying these regimes exist. We need to do what we need to do until things change. I'm not going to say we need to change everything and then we start doing. We are doing, and the entrepreneurs are going to be the agents of change. And since the Arab Spring, these people that I'm talking to you, and you weren't listening to me well, I'm saying Twitter is allowed to operate because people are voicing their opinion. They no longer are in Tahrir Square. They are somewhere else saying exactly the same thing. And they're empowered by certain people on the ground that are also from the private sector. And those of us who are taking risks and investing in early stage startups are basically betting on the youth to create a new dawn in the Middle East. That's what we're doing. So I'm not going to take problems as an excuse for doing nothing. Please.
My name is Ambreen Mirza. I teach a class called Innovative Social Enterprises. Our class is scheduled today from 6 to 9, and I brought all my students to this lecture because my class is cross-listed with the College of Engineering's Entrepreneur Leadership Studies program, as well as the Tisch College of Civic Life. And I'm familiar with your talks before because I've been to the Presidential Summit on Entrepreneurship.
In 2010.
2010.
In DC.
I was there. Yes. And I've worked with Jordanian entrepreneurs for 12 years. So Anas Ramawi, who is from Boston.
I know Anas, he's a good friend of mine.
And I also worked with another startup that it was called Telematics, a semiconductor company. Yes. And their founders were a team of Pakistani and Jordanian entrepreneurs. Right. And so I was helping them with their business plan. So I've kind of seen Jordan kind of in the center from South Asia to the U.S. in a very unique way. And spring break, I appreciate your question because I just came back from Pakistan. Actually, I was in Pakistan.
And Pakistan is just starting to have an explosion in the startup scene.
Oh, Pakistan is having an explosion for a long time. Actually, people don't talk about it either. People are talking about it either, right?
If you go on Facebook, you will find these stories.
Right, exactly.
You won't find them in the newspapers. You will find them on Facebook.
So funny story. I was in Pakistan and I thought at the wrong place at the wrong time because I was also there for that suicide bombing, which put the whole city at a standstill.
In Lahore.
Put the whole entire city at a standstill. And I was actually supposed to be at a conference a few days later in Malaysia, but the way the security situation became, my family was like, "You're not going anywhere. I think you're going to hang out here for a little while longer." And the only thing I had was my WhatsApp and my Skype. And before leaving, there was actually a Silicon Valley entrepreneur in Nigeria who is from Nigeria, who has 30,000 users. And so we were WhatsApping, and he said, "Listen, I get what's going on in Pakistan, and the same educational text. It's a software for training high school students for test preparation." And it's really taken off in Nigeria because of the instability in Nigeria has kind of created that opportunity. Right. And before he had wanted me to write his business plan, but now that I was sitting in Pakistan, I was actually kind of getting it because I have, nieces and nephews, and I was like, I think they should still be preparing for tests even though we have a security situation. So while I was there, he hired me. Wrote his business plan for the Mass Challenge application, which I'm always telling my students, apply for these business plan competitions. I actually prepare students and professionals to write their business plans to get their funding. And so as we're sitting there writing the business plan competition, everything actually was making more sense to me because I was actually in a very stressful security situation that suddenly, and I'm surrounded also in a country that's 50% under the age of 25, who are all homebound just on Skype and WhatsApp and WeChat and all of that. So he said, "Ambreen, you know what? I want you to be my, future director of business development. I want to expand to Pakistan. I'm already in Nigeria. I want to do these 5 countries." And so, to your question about, of course, I know we have the same government instability and problems, that you're talking about, but ironically, it's kind of because of that instability that kind of has created these kids at home creating their video games and test preparation software, and it's kind of forcing the innovation too, and actually creating partners in other unstable countries at the same time.
So if you ask Google today,
Yeah,
who are the best developers,
right,
you know where they will tell you? In Gaza.
right.
You
But they
know
have
why?
to stay home.
Because they can't move. And
Right.
Gaza is a big prison.
Right,
So Gazans effectively become incredible software developers.
right.
Because they spend a lot of time behind their screens. So the answer to your question, I mean, again, to my friend over there, is that entrepreneurs are in the business of defying the status quo. I mean, that's what they do.
People have to
That's what
still.
they do. So if otherwise they would not. I mean, they are the people at the forefront of change. They are the people that are forcing regulators to run behind them, and in an economy that was historically dependent on oil across the region, by the way. Even the countries that are non-oil, like Lebanon, like Syria, well, Syria is another story, Jordan, and Egypt, are dependent on Gulf money.
Right.
And we are oil economies across the region. And when the oil goes down, what it forces on us, the transformation that is required in the economic reforms that are happening and needed to happen today, so that we prepare ourselves for the post-oil era. And that means entrepreneurship, and that means government cannot employ anymore, because it was the employment of choice. And government told everyone, I'm going to give you an education and I'm going to employ you. But when they don't have money, they can't employ them.
Right.
And when you're not employed and you sit at home, you can either complain forever, or you can start becoming an entrepreneur and becoming an employer rather than a job seeker. So that in the digital world, that element is just starting to happen, meaning we might see it at the very... Do you know the story of the sequencing of the genome? The story of the sequencing of the genome was it's going to take 15 years and it will cost around $7 or $8 billion to sequence the genome. And they started in the in 1995, and they thought by 2005 or 2000 they would finish. But midway through, they only sequenced 1%. You know that. They only sequenced 1%, and the whole scientific community went to the guys that were the scientists that were sequencing the genome and said, you are embarrassing us. At the rate that you are going, at 1% after 6 or 7 years, it's going to take you about 400 years to sequence the genome. This is not doable. And then there's a guy by the name of Ray Kurzweil. You know Ray Kurzweil? So Ray Kurzweil is artificial intelligence. He's at Google now. He's the founder of Singularity University. Ray Kurzweil came up with a law at that time that is called the law of accelerated returns. If you check it out, you will find. What does the law of accelerated returns say? It says when everything is digital, then it is no longer linear in the way you think. So it's not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It is 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, etc. He says when you are at 1%, you have already gone halfway through. Because the next doubling up is going to get you to 100 in 5 years. And that is exactly what happened. So they sequenced the genome in the time period that they said. Why am I saying that? I'm saying that in the digital world and our region and many regions of the world, including Pakistan, are at that 1%, where nobody is seeing it, and we're all thinking that it is not really happening, but in the digital world, it is suddenly going to explode, and it's going to explode in our faces. In my view, the biggest disruption in the region today is not dictatorship and is not ISIS. It is what the digital disruption is going to do to traditional businesses and to our education system. That's the biggest problem that I think the Arab world is facing today. How do we prepare our kids for the 21st century that is accelerating at a rate that is beyond even the Western comprehension in its education system? I think even in your universities, that's a big challenge that we think about. Yes, sir.
Thank you. My name is Nadim Shehadi. I'm a first year volunteer to degree with MBA. My question
Shukhair
is,
from Lebanon?
I'm from Lebanon.
Because there's Shukhair in Jordan also.
I know.
He was named after me.
After? Very good, yes, it's about the first name always. Yes,
So my question is, what you seem to be saying is that we're starting with the startup revolution. The challenge going forward is going to be a challenge of scale, which means we need more money.
More money and improving infrastructure and opening up markets. Without markets, you're not gonna scale.
So in those elements of what in this entrepreneurship ecosystem is, access to capital is one of the things that
Biggest.
governments are looking to improve, or other organizations
Correct.
such as Warde.
Correct.
You speak also to 14% of the Arab population being, only 14% being banked. What is the state of the financial infrastructure such that a good private equity market can be developed in this world? So we can
You know, the private equity is quite, has a long tradition in the region. Long meaning, I mean, in the past 15, 20 years, it has really flourished, as you know. There are several funds across the region that have popped up and are doing relatively well. So Aramex Capital, Gulf Capital in Abu Dhabi, and then there's the sovereign wealth funds that are already allocating money for developing the infrastructure across the region. So that's, I'm not worried about big money. Big projects will get big money easily. My biggest worry is what I call the infrastructure of capital, which means at the very early stage. We need money at seed stage, angel level, and the very early $5 million checks. That is where the biggest gap is globally, by the way. It's not only our problem, but in the region it's important. Because if you don't get a lot of startups, you're not going to get scale-ups. So there are networks of small angel networks that are popping up across the region, but we need to have much more. And as you go to Silicon Valley, by the way, they tell you it is so essential that you have many failures along the way. You don't need to talk about the successes early on in the industry development. You need to talk about the failures, because these failing companies are going to be the next generation of the successful companies. This is the ultimate learning by doing. And that's why you need to have a massive network of angel investors. It's starting to happen. The seeds are there. Let me give you, again, take it from me, I don't have the exact statistics, but because I'm in the business, I can tell you. 5 years ago, there was not a single penny in venture capital happening. Okay, I was the first, I mean, I hate to say but I was the first angel investor in the internet space, in the region. Today, there are hundreds. There's about $1 billion in venture capital happening today. 5 years ago, there was zero. Souk raised $270 million in the West. They did, and then the Singapore Sovereign Wealth Fund is investing in Souk today. Why? Size. That's why it matters, because when Souk goes public, and Souk will probably go public, again to my friend over there, it will go public on a non-Arab stock market, because the Arab regulatory system does not allow a company like Souk to actually go public, because most of its shareholders are foreigners. And most of the Arab stock markets will refuse to have majority foreign ownership on them. So Souk will go public in London, which will create a whole issue in the region. Because people will ask, why are you not going public on our stock exchanges? One. And number two, let's assume it goes public at around $3-4 billion. It will be, how big a statement is that you can actually invest in the internet and make money and go public at $4 billion. Massive statement. And in a virtual company, it owns no assets. So zero assets. It only has techies and an app. 75% of their sales, by the way, happen on the phone. 75% of their sales happen on the phone. And it's accelerating. They're pushing it to actually abolish completely their web presence and only sell to the phone. What is that doing, by the way? Through the phone, their people are paying without having a bank account, because you can have your own. Souk owns the biggest mobile payment company in the region, called Payfor. They actually created it, incubated it, and so you effectively will never leave the screen of your phone when you are shopping. So will that make a statement? It will make an absolutely incredible statement.
Hi, my name is Chris. I'm from Singapore and Myanmar. So Myanmar.
You have fantastic program. In Singapore, you said you are from Singapore?
I'm originally from Myanmar, but I grew up in Singapore.
Okay.
Yeah. we do have a good startup scene that's coming up.
And you know what the government does? It gives for every venture capital dollar, the government will match you with 5 to encourage the system. That's how Singapore started happening.
Yeah. Well.
No. In the startup scene, it happened before that.
Yeah. Well, I am a youth entrepreneur, and I have a social enterprise that I'm starting, which is pushing to change the culture, which I think is what's similar to what you're talking about in the Middle East. So I have a few questions for you. One is,
there's a government policy to encourage entrepreneurship.
My change.
They want people to be innovative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
right?
Except we also have similar strict censorship. You know, there are things like.
What censorship?
like putting a 17-year-old into jail because he made fun of.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not condoning this. I'm just saying you can read about those stories. I don't mind them, but I need to hear another story from you. Tell me.
Yeah. So I strongly believe that, like you said, I'm a very optimistic person, and I also believe that there's like a lot of youth that want to talk about it, right?
Right.
So you're talking about how like people are engaging in issues on Twitter and having a lot of good conversations, but I think there's more that we can do than just talk on Twitter.
Okay.
Okay. So I've
Fair.
Story. In Singapore, like if you are a college student, your average activity includes starting a pageant in campus as a popularity contest. But so I say, why don't you use your efforts and your talents to do something more about the social issues in Singapore, like condoning pregnant teenage moms and stuff like that. So I say, this is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to change the culture in Singapore. And so my question is, how do you measure change in culture? Because I think this is one of the metrics that I'm struggling with, because I say I want to promote conversation, I want to promote action.
Where did you learn this word measure?
From me.
I'll tell you. Ever since I started in the non-profit world, everybody keeps telling me measure. Okay, I appreciate that you need to measure to know, but it shouldn't stop you from actually going out and doing. But why? Don't get concerned about measure now.
Okay.
Get concerned about doing, and then measure.
Yeah, we are doing. Just
Exactly.
I need to answer.
So the idea, the whole concept of entrepreneurship is don't think of the ultimate impact eventually, especially when you're talking about the social entrepreneurship side. Just go out. If it impacts 10 people, then you're impactful. You don't need to think that you want to impact every part of society. But if you impact your neighborhood, then you're impacting something. So
that's encouraging.
No, but that's what you need to think. I mean, think about quick wins. Think about immediate wins.
Okay.
Why do we need to change the world all the time? Let's change our street. Let me give you an example. In Ruwal, and the organization that I'm involved in, the students they realized that the streets are continuously dirty. This is a near slum neighborhood. Near slum. I don't want to call it slum. It's not a nice word, but it's a near slum neighborhood. They don't pick up the garbage because the city just forgets. That's what marginalization is. So the students decided that their volunteer program was going to be to research and see why the people are throwing the trash in the streets. And they discovered that there's 50,000, 60,000 people in that community. And they did the research and they said for every 2,000 inhabitants you need at least one trash can. And in the community there were much less than that. So they did a bit of research, discovered, went out and manufactured, bought these trash cans and made them available in the street and got the students to volunteer to do the initial cleaning of the streets. And now there is no street garbage anymore because there are enough trash cans. So what did they? They didn't change the whole world, but they changed the community. And what did it do at the same time? It got them to feel that they actually own their own street. So there is a sense of empowerment in it. What impact is that? I don't know. But it's enough that there is no trash in the street.
Well, I think the reason why measurement is so important for us and like why it is coming into our conversation is because we're starting out as students, you know, and like I have no money to invest in my own enterprise, although I want to, you know. I can put in like $2,000, $3,000, but the thing is like
put that $3,000, prove a case, you will get other people to support you. But you need to start somewhere.
I guess that's the thing, because my second question was like, what do you look for in youth entrepreneurs? Because you're a VC, right? And then the thing is like, it's so easy for people to want to invest in technology, invest in like poverty elevation. But here, what I'm trying to do is to change culture, and I think it's so different.
You need to define then what does change culture mean? I mean, if you want to change culture, then what is it that you want to change, and how do you go about it?
Like,
So that's something that you need to define when you start something. You need to have your own definition of what you're starting,
yeah, as in I do have it now.
and then you can understand what the measurement is.
Right. I just feel like it's a bit harder for when you come to think of like abstract things and like art, and like you said, like how do you measure this the street impact thing? So I just think that it's like a different
But
struggle than big.
That's one. But you also need to realize that impact takes time.
Yeah.
When you're talking change of culture, then you're talking a generational change. So you can't know it in 1 or 2 years. You need a generational change means 15, 20 years. That's how you change culture. Culture does not change by, it's not a startup. You're not selling a product online and you know that your products are selling. To feel the impact of cultural change just takes time. Nadim, you manage. And
Yes. Okay, so we have-
It's a different kind of question.
No, you have to allow others to ask.
I have to allow Ravi, but you know, there's the dictatorship of what's.
Yes.
I've been sent a message that we have to sort of
To wrap up.
start wrapping up, but Ravi, you will be the last.
Thank you. Fadi, I know, thank you first of all for
Thank you.
making the time and coming. This is fantastic, right? Let's talk Saudi Arabia. And you know,
I do business there, so I need to go back.
yes, you will.
That's the complicity I was
This is
talking about.
this is
I'm going to
this
take you
question
with
is
me over there.
this question is to the trend spotter, right? And you know, clearly, oil prices doing what they are creating a set of changes in the political and the economic sort of realms. Which one of the two do you think will happen faster? Driverless cars or the Shura Council allowing women to drive?
I'll tell you what. I think. I mean, who wants to drive cars anyway?
Is the Mutawars would like that answer.
No, did you hear about the law that came out yesterday on the Mutawars?
No. Oh yes, about them being
Restricted.
less strict.
No,
Not the law is basically restricting them from what they can do.
Yes, yes.
And this is the start. Saudi, talk about cultural change. There is, watch Saudi Arabia very, very carefully in the coming 2 years. This is the place where you're going to see a massive amount of change. And I hope it's going to be positive change, and there continues to be stability in that country, because believe me, that country is, in my view, the only country in the region that's too big to fail. So it needs to succeed. It has a very active youthful population, very active. If you go to Twitter, I mean it, because that's where you need to read what's happening there. They're extremely critical. They're talkative, they're active. They can't go down to the street, but they go somewhere else. And change is going to be happening in Saudi Arabia. There's already, again, economic reform is happening. You started seeing by the alleviation of some of the subsidies.
Taxes.
And then there's a talk of a VAT for the first time in the history of the country. They're discussing driving or non-driving, but I think, it's okay, it's an important issue, but symbolically. And we just need to watch it, and I think change will happen over there. There's the national transformation plan that Prince Mohammed bin Salman has been promising will be launched, I hear, on the 25th of April. Read about it. And if his interviews are any indication, it could be quite a substantial statement.
Question about hardware. Can I-
Hardware,
Okay.
yes.
I'm seeing that there's very little investment in hardware innovation, and most of the investments are in shopping online, or service or songs and so on.
Big data.
What's your view on that?
There is a beautiful Lebanese company called Instabit.
Yep, Instantly.
So Instabit,
That's pretty
I'm an investor in Instabit, so give me that much, okay? And Instabit is Hind Hubayqa, who is a Lebanese swimmer who is reinventing goggles.
I know about them. Yeah.
And she is already in Silicon Valley. She raised a round of $4 million just now, because her first batch did not go as.
My question is why?
Why?
There's little
Because it
investment in
is
hardware.
people that want to do hardware leave Lebanon and go to Silicon Valley, because that's where it is.
No university research and structure.
I'm not seeing that, but that's a gap. I mean,
That's probably related.
it's a gap. R&D in our universities don't exist. R&D in terms of R&D and then going to commercialization. There is no linkage between private sector and the education system in the Arab world. They don't talk to each other. So thus you can't commercialize.
Hey, sorry.
And by the way, I'm not taking it at the time. I mean, so don't blame me for
We will have the last.
I'm here.
I have a literally a 3-word question because my students have to write a self-assessment paper on being an entrepreneur. Nature versus nurture. Are people
I'm a
born-
nurture fan.
Okay, so people are born
And because if you
entrepreneurs,
say
train them.
nature, then you are basically telling people that you cannot have it because you were not born with it. And that is, God did not mean that to happen. You are basically telling people it's in your genes. And that's like exclusivist. That's terrible. So learnable. But the nature side of it is your passion for it. So you need to be an entrepreneur to be one. But you can't go to school and say, I don't know what I'm going to study, I will study an entrepreneur. That doesn't work. You really need to be an entrepreneur, and there are skills that entrepreneurs need to acquire. And you need to acquire them to do that.
Thank you. Well, anyway, the conversation continues. It started this afternoon, and we're having another lunch.
But I'm gonna censor the audience tomorrow.
Tomorrow we'll censor the audience.
Because in the Arab tradition, we businessmen can censor.
Absolutely. So thank you very
I'm just
much.
joking. So thank you.